Do you remember our episodes on Tara-Leigh Cobble and intentional singleness? Today, we revisit the topic after listening to a more recent Heart of Dating episode featuring a later interview with Tara-Leigh Cobble. In today's episode, we'll discuss that later interview and what Tara-Leigh shared about dating and singleness. Welcome to the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, a place where Christian single women aged 50 plus connect. I am your host, Janine Jordan, a Christian confidence coach and leadership mentor in Alberta, Canada.
And I'm your co-host, Ellie McCormick, a Christian longevity coach and mentor in the USA. Being single women over 50, we know what it's like to feel overlooked, to have unrealized dreams, to experience the challenges of singlehood, and to be concerned about what our future will look like. We couldn't find anything online for single Christian women over 50, so we created Jesus People Sisterhood just for you, a place where sisters encourage and empower one another through the last third of life, because you are a treasure trove of wisdom and of exceedingly great value. This is an authentic community, a supportive family, with other women on the same journey where Jesus is the center of it all. Here you will find real talk, real community, and real sisters.
Join us as we discuss building relationships, whole health, and growing spiritually. We'll review helpful books and articles, chat with guest speakers, share success stories, and have some laughs along the way. So grab your favorite beverage and we'll get started. Welcome, sisters, to this episode of the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, the only podcast specifically for single Christian women over 50. Today, we give a shout out to our sisters in the Czech Republic. Thank you for listening. It's a blessing to provide this podcast for free, but it does cost us to produce Jesus People Sisterhood episodes. It would be a great blessing to us that if you decide to buy a book mentioned in this podcast, you purchase it through the link in our episode show notes.
We want everyone to get to know our listeners, and so we'll be doing listener spotlight episodes from time to time. If you would like to share your testimony or what the Lord is doing in your life currently, or if you are leading in ministry or another field and would like to tell us about that for a Jesus Sister Excelling in the Last Third episode, please contact us at support@JesusPeopleSisterhood.com. We would love to have our listeners come and share with the sisterhood. And now, let's get to today's episode.
Today's episode is part one of our update on Tara-Leigh Cobble's thoughts on singleness and dating.
In episodes 48 and 49 of our podcast, we discussed Tara-Leigh Cobble of the Bible Recap's October 2020 interview on the Heart of Dating podcast about intentional singleness. We want to give a shout out to listener Army Hayes, who let us know that Tara-Leigh did a later episode with the Heart of Dating hosts in December 2023, where she updates where she is with intentional singleness. Thank you, Army, for making us aware so we can update our listeners. We listened to the later episode and wanted to share with you how things have changed with Tara-Leigh since our previous episodes on the subject.
Since this later episode was already 2 years ago, things could be different now for Tara-Leigh. And Tara-Leigh, if you're out there listening to the podcast, we'd love to have you on and share any updates or anything you wish to add. So we'll be going through our episode notes and discussing what Tara-Leigh and the host shared in episode 212 of the Heart of Dating podcast, as well as our own thoughts on the subject of closed and open singleness. I guess we'll just start, Ellie, with a little bit of background. So if you want to tell us a little bit about what Tara-Leigh was originally doing as far as her online media presence and those sort of things, and now what she's doing, maybe you could give us a little bit of an update as far as we know from the episode that we listened to.
In the 2020 episode on intentional singleness, she had just started Bible Recap. And of course, it's exploded. I mean, she's everywhere now. And now beyond the Bible Recap, which is a Bible study where they go through the Bible in like a year, and she goes over the different every day whatever the Bible reading is. She also has Bible study groups called D groups where I think they study like a book of the Bible more in depth for so
Mhm.
many weeks.
Right.
She also has luxury tours to Israel. I don't know if that's going on right now. I know in the 2023 episode, they had stopped, of course, because that was right after October 7th, the October 7th massacre.
Mhm.
So then she also speaks and writes, and she has a radio program called The God Shot. So she's really taken off in those 3 years.
What we'll do next is maybe talk a little bit about the way that she viewed singleness before we learned about this change, I guess, in what she's sort of doing now. And so just so that listeners understand, Tara-Leigh Cobble had a rather a closed singleness and whereby she was entirely switched off as far as dating was concerned. And she apparently did not pursue it. And actively was engaged in actually thwarting any attempts to go on a date, to be dated, and she basically just sort of shut down that part of her life for a period of time. She didn't really, I guess, it just wasn't a part, it wasn't a focus, and she had made that decision, and it was a firm no. And then we learn a little bit later that in the episode 212 of the Heart of Dating podcast that she's had a little bit of a change of heart, so to speak. So you want to carry on from there, Ellie?
Yeah, I do want to say the hosts of the Heart of Dating podcast, because I always call them hosts because I forget, but it's Kate and JJ Tomlin. So those are the
Right.
hosts. And
Mhm.
actually, when Tara-Leigh did her first interview on that podcast, Kate was single. So in between that time, those 3 years, Kate married JJ. Just an update on that. So when we talk about the hosts, that's who we're talking about.
Mhm.
So I don't know that Tara-Leigh actually changed her heart. I think it was actually that reason that she had a heart. She still said she wanted to be married, and she said that in that podcast episode, in the intentional singleness one, that what happened is that her pastor contacted her, and she gives the date, May 21st, 2021, what she calls her life pastor, the pastor who had gotten her to study the Bible years earlier, contacted her and said, "Do you still have intentional singleness in your bio, or intentionally single on your bio?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Oh, I want you to take that down." And she was like, "Whoa, why? You have somebody for me?" And he said that wasn't it, and that to hear him out, but it has always been her heart to be married, and that he felt that she was not talking to God about it, that
Mhm.
she had just totally sidelined the whole dating, the whole relationship thing, when that isn't really where her heart was. And so her heart hadn't changed. It was just how she was dealing with it, I think.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
yeah, so after he said that to her, she did that. And he told her he wanted her to start praying and talking to God about it, that she had not been talking to God about where her heart really was. And I feel like, yeah, she couldn't have been, because she said that anybody who asked her out, or any friends that suggested, it was always no, no, no. She just
Mhm.
totally shut it down. Which, if you still wanted to be married, why wouldn't you ever question, like, well, this person asked me out, or somebody suggested this person as a
Mhm.
possibility, if there was something,
Yeah,
you were just shutting it down.
right, right. Yeah, yeah, I wholeheartedly thought about that. And I was thinking, so every time that there was an opportunity that came forward, anyway, we don't know what goes on within people and sort of how that would be, but obviously she decided that she was just going to, sort of shut that down. And then there along comes the pastor who says, "Hey, wait a minute, this might not be such a good idea, and maybe you need to pray through some things." And so she then goes on some dates, right? and describes in sort of depth some of those experiences that she has. And they're really quite interesting. I think that she had some good dates, but she had some very bad dates too. And the bad dates involved a number of things that we certainly wouldn't want to happen to any of us or any of you. And so, should we talk about the bad dates? I thought the bad dates were really,
That
and
was funny.
wow, they were bad.
She said that it was scary to start dating again, but because what her pastor said, she had not been sharing with God deepest
Mhm.
desire of her heart, which was to be married.
Right.
That sounds like then she immediately, that
Okay.
was my impression, was like, all right, I'm out there because then she's being set up by friends, she's on dating apps. And
Hmm.
so she
Hmm.
says that she'd gone on the best first dates in her life and the worst first dates in her life in that time period. So
Right.
for the last 2 years,
Hmm.
then the host, I think it was JJ, the husband, asked
Right.
about the worst dates. And I
Because everybody always wants to hear that, right?
Yes,
They
it
always
is
want to
so
hear that.
cringe,
Yeah.
because if any of our sisters are out there dating, we know it is like such a hard thing to
Yeah.
date, right? Because you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
You want to share? She
Well,
shared
yeah, no,
the
I
three
have been
worst
on
dates.
some bad dates, and yeah, I can actually probably empathize with that. And so I think I just to make it not too dramatic, but she just explained that in on one date she was actually taken somewhere that she didn't really want to go. And it was like she didn't say she was kidnapped, but she felt like she was being kidnapped and being taken against her will. And that was the first bad date. And then the second bad date was when she actually ended up dating a neo-Nazi. And it wasn't like, she'd found him somewhere. That was actually some people had introduced her to him and they were friends, right? Wasn't that they were
And she
friends?
said two separate friends
Right. And so
suggested this guy.
and
And
so
she said, of
they
course,
didn't
they did
know, so
not
he
know.
must have hit it pretty well, right?
They did not know that he was a
Right.
Nazi.
Right. And then the third bad date, I mean, obviously she didn't end up staying with that man. And the other one, it seemed to be she was still struggling with the third bad date and was considering getting a restraining order. And so I think it was JJ who talked a little bit about restraining orders too and those sort of things. And that those are all very serious things that could happen, that could and did happen on dates. And they're our biggest fear, that we would encounter or someone like this. And so you would
Yeah,
think that,
I wanted to point out the date with the where she at the time of the recording of the episode was looking into
mm,
getting a restraining order.
yeah.
That guy she found on a dating app, and
Oh, right,
that when
right.
she didn't
Yeah.
want to date him, he became violent.
Yeah, right, right.
So it seems so dangerous and
Hmm.
scary, right? In the dating world. All three of those scenarios I could see with our sisters even being older,
Hmm.
that you end up with somebody like
You
that.
get yourself into a situation that could be, could actually cost you your life, right? Could, yeah, just and certainly things that we don't want to have happen. Yeah. Hmm. Well, then, after she shared those horrifying details, sort of what had happened, then we sort of hear a little bit more about why she continued. Why did she continue after that? So you want to take it from there?
I think at that point, Tara-Leigh praises the hosts of Heart of Dating, and uh,
Hmm.
I'm not a regular listener of that podcast, and I think for me, it's really a podcast for younger people, younger single people. So,
Yeah.
and there really is a difference. As I listened to this episode, I think the episode we listened to before that we talked about, I think I made a comment probably in one of our episodes because it was a part one and a part two that you'll notice some of the advice or the way that they look at life is as a younger person. It's
Hmm.
like you don't realize some things until you're older. And so that was part of it too. But I think they did have a lot of good advice on some of the stuff that they're doing and trying to get single Christians to pull people in to give them advice, to have a community, because I think there's a lot of people who are Christian who are not dating like a Christian. You know,
Hmm.
they're involved in immorality, they're dating non-Christians,
Hmm.
and I think that the purpose of their podcast is to really help Christians navigate such a dangerous or difficult thing to do, dating.
Right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. With obviously large repercussions if you don't do it well. And I think you're right. And I think that Tara-Leigh talks about how important to get a community of people around you that believe in you and support you and are willing to listen to you and have a deep understanding of how you feel as a single in certain situations. And there was a little bit of a discussion about Christmas and where sometimes singles can feel a little bit more vulnerable perhaps and lonely and sad and maybe even angry, at times about the situation that they're in or how they feel the situation that they're in and she gives some good suggestions about turning that instead of inward and into self-pity and those sort of things, but turning that outward and into acts of service. And I think we've talked about that as well as, sometimes you can help yourself feel a little bit better with doing that. And
I think,
community is so
yeah,
sorry.
before we go further into some of the stuff to discuss, I did want to bring up that this, I think the title is of this episode was From Closed to Open Singleness with Tara
Hmm.
Lee, something similar to that. And
Right.
so the hosts talk about I think that's their terminology of closed singleness
Right.
and open singleness.
Hmm.
And they shared how they know people, I guess, they interact with lots of single people since that's their podcast,
Right.
was this season of closed singleness. And that sometimes people do this idea of what Tara-Leigh had done before. She called it
Hmm.
intentional singleness, of just saying, I'm not dating. I
Hmm.
need to just stop it because of this tension of wanting to be married, right? Of holding this tension of wanting to be married, but at the
Hmm.
same time, you just the things we just discussed of Tara Lee's three horrible dates,
Right.
how you just like ready to say forget it because dating can be so difficult and traumatic,
Yeah.
right? And so that sometimes people just need a season where they're like, no, 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 I'm just gonna focus on the rest of my life.
Right.
Yeah. Even though they still want to have a partner.
Exactly. And of course, the big revelation with Tara-Leigh is when she sort of announces that, she can, the season where she prays through, where she can pray through instead of being closed off and deciding to shut everything down, that she actually walks through and prays with the Lord through that season. And I think that was the difference, was it not? That there was that prayers going up and communication going up, and it wasn't a shutdown, right? It wasn't a shutdown in
Right.
communication
Right.
between herself and the Lord. Yeah.
So
And
she actually said in this later episode that she was contemplating closed singleness again,
hmm. Hmm.
and that if she decided to do that, that she would be praying and talking to the Lord about it. And she goes, "Not, I'm not saying like beforehand because she did do it beforehand, but
Right.
that through that, if she chose to go closed singleness,
Hmm.
where she stopped dating, that all through that season,
Hmm.
she would be communicating with the Lord and praying through the season, not just
Hmm.
before.
Right.
Yeah,
And then completely shutting down and not reevaluating again or
right,
reassessing again. Yeah.
right. Because
Hmm.
I would think, like for me, I would say, yeah, I'm intentionally single. I mean, I'm just living my life.
Hmm.
But I probably, if somebody asked me out, I would
Hmm.
pray about it,
Hmm.
right? I wouldn't just
Mhm.
immediately say no, because how do I know it's not from the Lord?
Right.
My only thought is like in those 2 years, 2 or 3 years that she was saying no was like she must not have met anybody closely, remotely near who she would want to marry, because how
Right.
would you just say no
Hmm.
out of hand?
Yeah, I think we discussed that. I think, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, well, wait a minute. And if there were opportunities coming up, like, yeah, would you just, but like we said, it's hard to, it's hard to say. Hmm.
I think one of the other things that, and again, so a lot of stuff that she shared, like those 3 horrible dates,
Hmm.
kind of does discourage you in dating. I
Hmm.
feel because then she shared about basically having her heart really broken.
Right. Hmm. Well, I think that's when she's talked about that she had her heart broken and that the things hadn't worked out in that relationship, but she was very much invested in it. And then she just talked about how much she was grieving. And then I think she started talking about how she came out of that is through community, as people coming around and as she shared and as she was vulnerable and she seems to be the very much that kind of a person that is just so open and ready to share those things that maybe it's very difficult for all of us to share. And so I think that she did have people come around her and she did have those ladies show up, and when she felt extreme moments of maybe loneliness and aching for that relationship, that she was able to find solace in community around her that she'd gathered. And so yeah, I think that
Well, the breakup sounded devastating.
right,
And,
that's true.
and, and
Yeah.
she said it
Hmm.
wasn't so much, I think, that the broken heart over the guy, it was that she had the dreams of this relationship because the guy
Hmm.
had moved to where she lived to date her. Everything seemed like it was going well, and then he broke up with her.
Right.
And so that was very devastating. And that she said she didn't even recognize herself because she'd never been a very anxious person.
Right.
As she was describing it, I just thought of like when my heart was broken from my high school sweetheart and I was like suicidal. I mean, I'm just thinking about, or when you got
Hmm.
divorced, all these painful breakups that
Hmm.
nobody ever wants to go through again
Hmm.
because they can be so devastating,
Hmm.
right?
And it's that loss of the dream, right? It's the loss of the future. It's the loss of what could have been. And those are very much an entangled in there as well. And I think we can both relate.
Right. And so
Yeah.
she was surprised because she had not
Hmm.
experienced kind of the emotional and psychological
Hmm.
symptoms that she
Hmm.
was. And so she ended up going to like 3 different therapies.
Right. Yeah.
She did EMDR, she did neurofeedback, and
Yep.
she went to group therapy,
Hmm.
just trying to get emotionally healthy.
Right. Hmm. Yeah. It's in my own, I can only speak for myself, but after my divorce, I sunk into the deepest depression. And it was a terrible time. And I think we sometimes forget that there's, well, maybe not forget, but it's hard for people on the outside looking into even understand what you're actually going through in that time period and how it is just devastating. It can be just devastating to our whole life, to our and even to our own bodies, right? Where she was talking about how her body was reacting and falling into this state of anxiousness, something that she hadn't had before. And I can say that falling into a clinical depression is something that I never would have thought that I would have, had to endure either. And there's just, as we know, I mean, there's something about that suffering after the relationship that makes it even the bad things with all the bad dates that she had, but it's that heartache that you think of that could happen at the end of something as well that is really a deterrent maybe for even pursuing a relationship again. And that's why it takes a long time for people to build back. And
Right.
yeah, really empathize with her there. Hmm.
Yeah. But I think she does mention, I don't know if it's at this part of the episode, but how going through these things really does strengthen your relationship
Mm,
with the Lord.
yeah, right.
So that's absolutely
And they do, and it does. That is true. I think that's true. I don't know if it's true in every single case, but I would say that it's certainly been true as far as I'm concerned. Those deep, deep valleys also had big, big mountains that were, where you got to the top of it again, and there really was sunshine, and you had learned something, and you did develop more, and you did walk more closely with the Lord through that time.
right. And you
Yeah,
really grew.
you did. Yeah, exactly.
For the sake of time, we'll stop the episode here and pick up next week with the rest of our discussion on Tara-Leigh Cobble's more recent interview with the Heart of Dating podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please share any thoughts that resonated with you from today's podcast episode in our private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community. Start reaching out to other single women and create your local group of Jesus People Sisters. Please let us know about your group to add to our directory by contacting us at support@JesusPeopleSisterhood.com.
Have you had a good experience with a business? They've treated you honestly and helped you at a reasonable price? Please let us know. We would like to start a directory of JPS-friendly businesses. Let's care for one another.
Be blessed by him who is able to protect you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of his glory, blameless and with great joy. Until next time.
Hey, sister, before you go, thank you for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, the best way to say thank you is by leaving a 5-star written review at Apple Podcasts. That raises us in the rankings and helps other sisters find us too. And please tell a friend or post it on your social media. If you're a single Christian woman over 50, this podcast was created specifically for you. The Jesus People Sisterhood is your community to find support and friendship with other sisters who can understand. Be sure to follow us on your podcast app and join our free private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community.
Jesus People Sisterhood has also started a private Facebook group for housing and co-living opportunities. You can check that out at Jesus People Sisterhood Senior Housing. You can also find us on Facebook at Jesus People Sisterhood and individually for Janine at riseupcoachingandconsulting.com and for Ellie at samaramountain.com. And ladies, this is the necessary disclaimer. Our podcast content is for informational purposes and does not constitute professional advice from mental health, medical, legal, financial, or other areas. The opinions of the guest do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host. It is our heart that this podcast will be a blessing to you. Together, let's build a powerful sisterhood with Jesus. Make a friend, add a sister, across the border and around the world.